Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 3 episode number 12 based on novel. So let's start. Reservoir water heaved and churned as waves of berserk Genesis chi pulsed violently. It was as if something had torn through the water in a 10,000 feet radius, leaving a giant gaping hole that immediately began filling from the surrounding water, creating a giant whirlpool. Zhu Yuan stood far away, watching the imminent battle with interest. It was going to be a clash between Tunton and the 800 feet aquatic beast. Normally speaking, an aquatic beast that had reached such lengths would be an object of extreme terror to even 7th layer Alpha Origin disciples that were basically qualified to contest for the chief disciple seat. However, an aquatic beast with such strength was currently in exceedingly sorry state, because it had encountered an existence even more terrifying than itself today. Tunton was nowhere near as big as the 800 feet beast, but the aquatic beast was thoroughly suppressed at every clash, barely able to put up any resistance. Moreover, it was obvious that Tunton was toying with it. The little guy is quite something, praised Zhu Yuan with a click of his tongue. The outcome of the fight was already clear from the get-go. In the end, it turned out exactly as expected. Tunton was done playing after several minutes, and black light appeared with a slash of its claw. Boom! 5 giant claws tore through the water, shooting straight into the dark depths at the bottom of the reservoir. The 800 feet aquatic beast was violently ripped to shreds. Zhu Yuan drifted over and waved his sleeve, causing a head-sized Dragon Genesis essence crystal to slowly rise up in the water. Golden liquid flowed within it, the thickness far beyond any of the Dragon Genesis essence from before, making Zhu Yuan stare at it with desire. He very carefully kept the Dragon Genesis essence crystal as he said to Tunton, "I'll keep it first, we'll split it later." Tunton did not raise any objections. It had already eaten too much Dragon Genesis essence today. Zhu Yuan stretched his back, a little tired after so much hunting. "Let's find a place to reorganize and rest for a while before we continue." Tunton snorted disdainfully, as if saying that Zhu Yuan was really useless. Zhu Yuan paid no attention to it. He randomly chose a direction and began zooming away on his Genesis chi. A certain location in the Genesis reservoir. Several towering mountains partitioned the surface of the reservoir, creating a lush valley. Near the top of the valley, a bamboo house was barely discernible through the mists. Li Qingqian stood on a cliff nearby, her gaze somewhat cold as she peered into the distance. It should be about time for Kongxing and Yi Ji to find the 1,000 feet aquatic beast. "Those two bastards," mumbled Li Qingqian to herself. "Senior sister Qingqian, are you really not going to contest for the 1,000 feet aquatic beast?" Behind her were several pretty female disciples, who were also from the Snow Lotus Peak. This district belonged to Li Qingqian, and other disciples could only enter with her permission. Some of the female disciples were quite close to Li Qingqian, and had obviously found out about the matter regarding Kongxing and Yi Ji's cooperation from her. Li Qingqian's pretty face was calm as she replied, "Since I can't win, why should I force myself?" If there was only Kongxing, she would at least be able to put up a fight, but when Yi Ji was added in, there was really nothing she could achieve. As such, there was no need to be stubborn. Though she was admittedly still a little unwilling to accept this outcome. "Yi Ji is so loathsome, we never had any quarrel with him," remarked one of the female disciples. "A loss is a loss. It just means that I was not as prepared as Kongxing." Li Qingqian shook her head, not willing to speak any further on the topic. "You guys should make use of this time to search for Dragon Genesis essence." The female disciples exchanged a look, before nodding as they withdrew. Now that it was peaceful again, Li Qingqian lifted her head and sighed. Her slender fingers clenched into fists, clearly still slightly upset inside. After all, she had been preparing for a long time. With a gently push, her figure seemed to float down the cliff, landing beside a hot spring within the valley. This place was off limits to everyone else, but herself, and even the Snow Lotus Peak disciples she had allowed into the valley could not enter. Li Qingqian gently undid the sash on her waist, causing the white skirt to slip down to the ground. Under the faint sunlight, an exquisite figure in inner garments was revealed. A neck as slender as a swan leading to a set of elegant collarbones and 2 towering soft mounds. Her tiny slender waist made one unable to resist wrapping an arm around it, while her long legs were astonishingly sleek and slim. Even another girl would find her heart beating a little harder at the sight of such an amazing figure. The erotic sight made the entire valley appear brighter. Li Qingqian gently stepped into the hot spring, soaking her body in its warm waters. Her red lips rose slightly in delight, as her usually frosty face softened. A body glowing with youthfulness was masked only by the light reflection off the water. Li Qingqian's fine black hair sprawled across the surface of the spring as she leaned against its sides, her lovely body completely relaxed. Li Qingqian slowly said, "Kongming, Yi Ji. I'll make sure to settle this debt with you guys in the future." Her eyes slowly closed, enjoying every moment of comfort. The valley was exceptionally silent and peaceful, only the sound of the flowing breeze to be heard. In the hot spring, the goddess seemed to fall into a deep sleep, painting the gorgeous sight of a sleeping beauty that could cause the downfall of nations. The silence lasted for a long time, until a certain moment came where the surface of the spring seemed to ripple for an instant. Li Qingqian's long eyelashes trembled faintly, as she somewhat lazily opened her eyes. Likely because she had just woken up, her response was much slower than usual, as she dazedly stared at the ripples on the water in front of her. The ripples grew bigger and bigger, before the water surface was suddenly torn open as a figure jumped out. "Phew. I'm out at least." A voice sounded as the figure wiped away the water on its face, before beginning to scan its surroundings, while a little creature lazily lay on its shoulder. It was obviously Zhu Yuan and Tunton. Zhu Yuan's gaze curiously swept around, but immediately froze a split second later, as his eyes gradually widened. He had caught sight of the gorgeous figure in the spring. The gazes of the two met, both somewhat dazed. Li Qingqian was stunned, unable to stop herself from rubbing her eyes. The scene before was so shocking that she was unable to process it for the moment. It was also at this moment that Zhu Yuan saw her beautiful face. It was as if a bomb had gone off his head, instantly numbing his scalp. Li Qingqian. Not even in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that after traveling in the reservoir for a good half the day, he would encounter Li Qingqian soaking in the hot spring here. What kind of luck was this? Luck that would be the death of him. God damn it. Zhu Yuan's voice was already trembling. He had just sensed an alarmingly icy aura spread from Li Qingqian's body at this moment. This was genuine killing intent. Zhu Yuan suddenly felt pain from his ear the moment he was engulfed by the icy aura. Tunton had given him a vicious nip, jolting him back to his senses. He immediately submerged without the slightest shred of hesitation, as a terrified shout rang out, "I'm blind, I can't see anything." He fled the moment he popped back into the water, not even daring to glance backwards. Zhu Yuan's escape fully awakened Li Qingqian, her face turning so cold that frost was nearly about to form as her body trembled with rage. She never imagined that someone would suddenly appear like disaster from the sky when she was soaking in the hot spring. Her teeth clattered loudly as she beckoned with a hand, causing her skirt to fly from the edge of the spring and wrap around her body. Rumble. In the next instant, terrifying Genesis Chi exploded from her body without any reservation. Boom. Her figure shot forth, the water before her forcefully ripped apart by her terrifying Genesis Chi, as she dived in like a bolt of thunder, churning with killing intent, as she made a beeline for the frantically fleeing Zhu Yuan. "Die, you pervert." A voice so cold that it penetrated all the way into the bone pierced through the water, booming right on Zhu Yuan's heels. The misty waters of the reservoir were silent as usual. The silence was suddenly broken. One could only watch as an ethereal figure zoomed past, the golden Genesis Chi, at his feet propelling him forward as he desperately fled at a speed so fast that he was basically cutting through the water. This figure was naturally Zhu Yuan. His complexion was currently rather pale, while his scalp was still numb from before. The sight from earlier had really been a huge shock to him. He never expected that he would encounter Li Qingqian soaking in a hot spring at the random spot he chose to surface for a rest. The killing intent spewing from that woman's gaze earlier was practically on the verge of materializing in reality. "I am finished." Zhu Yuan could not stop grieving at his situation. Boom. The water behind him was suddenly ripped apart. Zhu Yuan looked back, only to be horrified by the sight Li Qingqian rapidly breaking through the water, frightening Genesis Chi whizzing around her body. From the chilling aura of murder around her, it was obvious that she would not let this go. Even while separated by a substantial amount of water, Zhu Yuan could still feel Li Qingqian's murderous gaze lock onto him from afar. It was a gaze that made a chill fill Zhu Yuan's entire body, causing him to frantically circulate his Genesis Chi, pushing his speed to the limit as he made his crazed escape. However, no matter how much he accelerated, Li Qingqian remained close on his heels, killing intent angrily churning around her. Senior Sister Lee, it wasn't intentional. I didn't know there would be someone on the surface. Wrapped in Genesis Chi, Zhu Yuan's voice was transmitted towards Li Qingchan in an attempt to calm her. However, Li Qingchan ignored his words, her only response the intensifying murder in her eyes. With a grasp of her hand, Genesis Chi rose, transforming into countless lotus petals whose edges flickered with an eerily cold light. The blade-like petals shot forth, aimed at Zhu Yuan's vitals. The icy sensation at this back alarmed Zhu Yuan, and he immediately began pushing his ethereal form to its peak. At the same time, magical python scales swiftly covered his body as he desperately dodged left and right, narrowly avoiding the Genesis Chi petals. Even though he had not been hit, the force from the petals that sliced past had drawn several light cuts on his skin. She's crazy. Zhu Yuan's complexion turned green with fear. Li Qingchan had shown no mercy, and had clearly already lost some of her rationality. This also told Zhu Yuan that it was impossible to reason with her. The best thing to do for now was to escape, and at the very minimum wait for Li Qingchan to calm down first before trying to talk. If she caught him, Zhu Yuan had the sinking feeling that he would be killed on the spot. On Zhu Yuan's shoulder, Tunton watched with a gloating expression, clearly showing no intentions of helping. With regards to Tunton, all Zhu Yuan could do was send it a vicious, flesh-cutting glare as he accelerated again. As such, a chase played out in the waters of the reservoir, both pursuer and the pursued giving it their all. The disturbance gave rise to giant waves, and the duo would occasionally encounter other disciples along the way. However, all of the disciples would hurriedly get out of the way at the sight of the murderous-looking Li Qingchan, astonishment on their faces as they watched the two go. Eh? Isn't that Senior Sister Li Qingchan? Who is she chasing? I don't recognize him, but from the looks of it, Senior Sister Qingchan is very angry. What did he do to offend her? He deserves it. I can't believe that he dared to anger Senior Sister Qingchan. He'd better hope he doesn't meet me, or I will catch him and bring him before Senior Sister Qingchan to atone for his crimes. With Senior Sister Qingchan personally in pursuit, there's no way that he's going to escape. Though Zhu Yuan encountered many disciples along the way, what made him despair was that not a single one had any intentions of helping him, instead casting unkind gazes at him. All of them are bastards. Zhu Yuan cursed inside. Behind him, Li Qingchan's face was a little surprised as she gazed at Zhu Yuan's figure. She had realized that even after chasing for so long, she was still unable to catch up to him. This was somewhat inconceivable to her. She could sense that Zhu Yuan was merely at the second layer alpha origin, someone whom she could basically squash with a single palm. However, why was she unable to catch up? Moreover, traveling in the Genesis reservoir was extremely taxing on one's Genesis Chi. Ordinarily speaking, a second-layer disciple should have run out of steam long ago, and yet Zhu Yuan seemed to have plenty of Genesis Chi left. No matter who you are, I will not easily let you off today. Li Qingchan's face was covered in frost. This was the first time she had experienced something like this. The mere thought that everything had been seen by this bastard who had suddenly appeared made rage and embarrassment surge in his heart, nearly destroying whatever rationality she had left. Iciness flashed in her eyes as she locked onto Zhu Yuan's figure. Her hand abruptly formed a seal, and vigorous Genesis Chi immediately swept out. It swiftly gathered together, forming a half-foot-tall snow lotus. The snow lotus was vivid and lifelike, ancient patterns adorning each of its petals. An intense cold spread from it, instantly freezing the surrounding water. Heaven Genesis technique, snow lotus sealing technique. She showed no mercy, directly activating an alarmingly powerful Heaven Genesis technique. The snow lotus trembled faintly. In the next instant, it transformed into a flash of white as it shot forth, freezing the surrounding waters wherever it passed. A torrential wave of coldness swept forth, causing Zhu Yuan's expression to change drastically. His speed was affected, gradually slowing down. He looked back as his pupils abruptly shrank. The incoming snow lotus was too alarmingly quick, making it basically impossible for him to dodge. The piercing chill from it made him feel life-threatening danger. If he was hit, there was no doubt that he would be instantly frozen. Tunton looked towards his shoulder at Tunton, who was clearly enjoying itself, as he said through gritted teeth, "If you keep watching, our collaboration will be over." Tunton unhappily snorted twice, as if saying that you were clearly the one who drew this trouble, why did it have to clean up after? Less nonsense, quick! Bellowed Zhu Yuan. The corners of Tuntun's mouth curled downwards in disapproval, but it still stood up on its legs. After all, it could not possibly just idly watch Zhu Yuan be slaughtered. It turned around, looking towards the incoming ice snow lotus, as its mouth suddenly opened. Mysterious black light rapidly converged, ultimately condensing into a ball of incomparable darkness that was sent shooting out. The black ball and snow lotus smashed into each other, but no noise sounded from their collision. The chilling aura turned sluggish, before ultimately vanishing along with the balk ball. Behind them, Li Qingqian was shocked by this sight, this turn of events clearly out of her expectations. How could she have expected her attack to be negated by the little creature on Zhu Yuan's shoulder? Zhu Yuan took advantage of this opportunity to accelerate and flee for his life, scuttling out of Li Qingqian's sights. Li Qingqian's eyes grew even colder as she watched him run away. Do you think that this will allow you to escape? Genesis Chi exploded beneath her feet, as her figure also cut through the water, relentlessly giving chase. At a certain valley by the reservoir, the water was suddenly torn open, as Zhu Yuan's figure miserably jumped out. He looked towards the faintly misty beach and hissed, "Big sis Yao Yao, save me." However, his face immediately turned rigid the moment these words left his mouth. He had seen Yao Yao with half of her fair, lovely shoulder revealed on the beach, just so happening to be in the process of removing her clothes for a soak in the reservoir. Zhu Yuan's face twitched madly. What was it with him and soaking today? While Zhu Yuan was stunned, Yao Yao's indifferent gaze swept over as the clothes that were about to be fully removed were swiftly worn again. Her bare feet began to walk along the rocks on the beach, the wet clothes on her body outlining a set of soul-stirring curves. Zhu Yuan. Yao Yao gently reached out a hand as a Genesis rune scroll appeared within it. She looked at Zhu Yuan and said in a soft voice, "I feel that you've become quite bold recently, right?" Zhu Yuan's face was filled with grief. Was it because he killed too many aquatic beasts earlier? Why was he so unlucky? This was retribution, wasn't it? Boom. While Zhu Yuan was still submerged in his intense sorrow, the water behind him was abruptly torn open as a pillar of water shot into the sky. At the same time, a stream of berserk Genesis Chi shot out, viciously striking at Zhu Yuan. "Die pervert." An ice-cold voice sounded. Li Qingqian had obviously caught up at last. This sudden turn of events stunned Yao Yao. However, she soon frowned when she sensed the power behind the Genesis Chi that was aimed at Zhu Yuan. An attack of this level was not within Zhu Yuan's threshold. Who exactly was this ruthless person? With a jerk of her hand, the Genesis rune scroll immediately began to burn as berserk Genesis Chi erupted. Genesis Chi whizzed out like a roaring black water dragon, smashing into the stream of Genesis Chi that was shooting towards Zhu Yuan, causing an alarming storm of energy to sweep outwards. Waves 10,000 feet high rose as Yao Yao indifferently looked towards the pretty figure that had attacked, while a cold voice followed. "He's mine, and you don't have the right to touch him." The black water dragon collided with the stream of Genesis Chi that gave off a piercing chill, causing a wave of berserk Genesis Chi to sweep outwards. Giant waves rose from the surface of the reservoir, before crashing into the walls of the valley, making the entire place tremble. Li Qingqian stood in the air above the water, powerful Genesis Chi surging out from her body to block the aftershocks of the clash. Her brows knitted together slightly, as she raised her pretty face and looked in Yao Yao's direction. The power the latter had displayed earlier had somewhat shaken the former's heart. When Li Qingqian finally got a clear view of Yao Yao, she could not help but be stunned. The latter's appearance and aura had taken away the breath of even someone like herself. This was not Li Qingqian being narcissistic. Over the years, she had grown to clearly understand how beautiful she was, though she was normally not very fond of the title of Zhangshuan sect's #1 beauty that the numerous disciples in the sect had given her. However, it could not be denied that there was no girl who did not care about appearance. And now that she had seen Yao Yao, even Li Qingqian could not help but be slightly stunned. Yao Yao's appearance and aura was not the least bit inferior to her own, and as a woman, Li Qingqian could even more keenly sense the mysteriousness from Yao Yao's body. Both of them were the distant, aloof and indifferent type. However, Li Qingqian's indifference was because there were too many people who adored her beauty. All it took was a little nudge, and any male would basically be bowing his head and groveling at her feet. However, this not only drew the critical opinions of others, but also attracted trouble to herself. Over the years, there had been no lack of disciples of the opposite sex that had once been quite close to her, only to end up drawing the envy of other disciples and being excluded. As this continued to occur, Li Qingqian began to withdraw into herself, hiding her feelings and becoming as cold as an ice mountain. She kept her distance with members of the opposite sex, because it would be best for everyone. Though Yao Yao also appeared indifferent, Li Qingqian could sense that they were different. Yao Weiro's indifference was not due to any person, but seemed to be on an even higher level that originated from her spirit and bloodline. Such a feeling was akin to the indifference a man felt towards an ant, because the two were on completely different levels, and hence no need to show any emotion. Like how a passing person would not care whether an ant would be crushed under his or her foot. It was this very aura of indifference that made Yao Yao appear increasingly mysterious. When did such an individual appear in the Zhongshuan sect? Remarked Li Qingqian in amazement inside as her gaze focused on Yao Yao. However, she too was no ordinary person and quickly banished such thoughts. Her eyes were suffused with iciness as she turned towards the nearby Zhu Yuan and coldly said with a face covered in frost, "You intend to protect this pervert?" Pervert? Yao Weiro's eyebrows raised slightly as she cast a glance at Zhu Yuan. She did not know what Zhu Yuan had done to be addressed in such a manner. Zhu Yuan hastily began to explain, "Senior Sister Li, I've tried to explain before. I was only trying to find a place to rest on the surface, and did not know that you would be there. You should understand how misty the reservoir is. I have no way of knowing the situation above." While he was speaking, Zhu Yuan lowered his head in shame, concentrating really hard not to let himself recall the scene from before. He was afraid he would have a nosebleed if he did not control his thoughts, and if that happened, this woman would surely never forgive him even after he died. Even though he tried to explain, Li Qingqian had no intentions of letting this matter rest. Her frosty face stared daggers at Zhu Yuan, while her teeth loudly grinded together. "Stop trying to make up excuses, you pervert." Li Qingqian's gaze shot towards Zhu Yuan like an arrow, as she icily said, "Follow me to the disciplinary hall on the charge of trespassing on a chosen's personal territory." She was originally going to say he had peeked at her while she was soaking in the hot spring, but how could she possibly reveal this matter? Zhu Yuan hurriedly shook his head. If he went to the disciplinary hall, things would surely end badly for him, especially given Li Qingqian's status. When that happened, suffering would be inevitable. Whether you go or not is not up to you. Li Qingqian's tone was ice cold. With a jerk of her white sleeve, deadly and icy Genesis chi unfurled, transforming into a snow dragon that roared as it charged towards Zhu Yuan. Rumble. However, the moment the snow dragon began its charge, thunder clouds gathered in the sky above as bolts of lightning descended with violence, blasting the snow dragon one after another. Yao Yao stood on the beach, indifference in her pupils as she looked at Li Qingqian while a Genesis rune scroll turned to ashes in her hand. Yao Yao nonchalantly said, "Whether he goes or not, is not up to you either." From the earlier exchange between the two, she already had a faint idea of what had transpired. However, she understood what kind of person Zhu Yuan was, and knew that his character was not despicable. She was certain that he would not be so shameless as to intentionally try to peek at another. Though the girl before her was pretty, her attacks had been extremely vicious, and Yao Yao was naturally not going to stand by the sidelines and allow the former to take Zhu Yuan away. "Humph, do you think that I'm afraid of you? From how you keep taking his side, you two must be in cahoots. I'll capture the both of you and send you to the disciplinary hall." Yao Weiro's repeated obstruction had begun to anger Li Qingqian. No one had ever dared to treat her in such a manner ever since she became one of the Chosens. Girls, especially beautiful ones, would oftentimes subconsciously compare themselves. Hence, Li Qingqian was very unwilling to concede anything in front of Yao Yao. "Then we'll see if you're capable enough." Yao Yao remained indifferent, but was clearly strongly opposed to the former, not prepared to give even an inch. For a time, the two faced each other with icy gazes, and even the air around seemed to freeze. Li Qingqian icily stared at Yao Yao, a slight trace of graveness surging in the depths of her eyes. Although Yao Weiro's Genesis chi undulations were weak, the spirit power accumulating between her brows was an indication of its power. Moreover, her mastery over Genesis runes felt quite immeasurable. This unreasonably pretty girl was clearly going to be an extremely troublesome opponent. Li Qingqian had a feeling that if it was purely Genesis rune mastery, even Yi Ji was not better. When had such a monster appeared in the Zhongshuan sect? Given the girl's strength, she should be qualified to vie for a spot in the 10 great chosens. Numerous thoughts swirled in her head, but were ultimately brought under control by Li Qingqian. No matter how strong this girl was, the former was not going to let this matter rest so easily. Li Qingqian was after all an extremely proud person. After suffering such a huge loss of modesty, if she was unable to even capture the culprit and allowed him to be saved by someone else, it would undoubtedly be a disgrace. Therefore, she needed to capture Zhu Yuan no matter the cost. Powerful Genesis Qi began to erupt from Li Qingqian's body at this moment, instantly freezing the water under her feet as a storm of ice and snow gathered on her hand. The temperature plummeted, so low that even snow started to appear. An indescribable pressure spread from Li Qingqian's slender body. It was obvious that Li Qingqian was no longer going to hold anything back. Yaoiro's eyes narrowed for an instant as the spirit light between her brows began to shake. A green jade Genesis rune brush appeared in her hand as ancient glowing runes began to appear around her body, revolving around her. Although she had no Genesis Qi, anyone could feel a heart-palpitating aura brewing. Two girls faced each other, one standing in the air over the reservoir, while the other stood on the rocks on the beach. Hostility swirled like a storm between them. Zhu Yuan's scalp turned numb at this sight. He did not know how huge of a commotion would be caused if the two were to fight, but it would be terrible for him no matter who ended up injured. At such a time, he could only pluck up his courage and try to stop them. Hence, Zhu Yuan gritted his teeth as he took a step forward and said in a stern voice, "Both of you stop." However, his imposing shout merely drew Yao Yao and Li Qingqian's piercingly icy gazes as their cold voices followed. Zhu Yuan's presence was instantly frozen, the expression on his face turning rigid, before he let out an awkward laugh under their frosty gazes, raising both his hands high in the air as he repeated stepped backwards. He, you two can have your fun. There was nothing he could do. One he could not afford to offend, the other he could not beat. On his shoulder, Tunton disdainfully looked towards Zhu Yuan as if questioning, "Are you really a man?" Zhu Yuan merely returned the look, "You can go ahead and try." Tunton snorted, as if saying, "I'm not the one who caused this." Zhu Yuan ignored it, merely anxiously watching the increasingly hostile atmosphere between the two girls. This is really, really bad. In a certain valley by the reservoir, two beautiful figures stood facing each other, the auras surging out from their bodies clashing continuously. It felt as if thunder was rumbling in the background as giant waves rose from the reservoir, crashing into the walls of the surrounding mountains. Yao Yao and Li Qingqian's icy gazes clashed, Genesis runes revolving around one of them, stirring the surrounding Genesis Qi, while Genesis Qi hovered above the other's head like clouds, giving off a menacing aura. Zhu Yuan wore a bitter look on his face as he watched. It was clear that neither of the two girls was planning on letting this matter rest. Since that was the case, the only thing to do was to let them vent some of their anger first. It would probably be best for him to step in only after they had cooled down a little. Although he would likely be beaten up by the both of them, he was the one who started this after all, and hence should be the one to resolve it. Zhu Yuan nervously watched the two girls as the atmosphere between them grew more and more intense. At a certain moment, both of their eyes narrowed slightly. An alarming wave of energy burst out from Genesis Qi and Genesis runes a split second later, both individuals clearly about to go at it for real at any moment. "Stop!" Right before they were about to attack, a shout sounded across the area like a clap of thunder. Next, Zhu Yuan felt a vast blanket of Genesis Qi descend from the sky, like a giant hand as it completely suppressed both Yao Yao and Li Qingqian's Genesis runes and Genesis Qi. Zhu Yuan immediately lifted his head, only to see a Genesis Qi cloud descend from the sky. A beautiful woman stood atop it, lotus flower-like runes flickering on edge of her long skirt. A terrifying Genesis Qi pressure pulsed from her body, causing the reservoir waters to churn violently. Zhu Yuan was slightly startled by the sight of this beautiful woman. From her Genesis Qi pressure, it was obvious that her identity was not simple at all. Li Qingqian was also stunned by the sight of the beautiful woman and hastily said, "Elder Miao." The woman was one of the elders of their Snow Lotus Peak. The woman called Elder Miao shot a somewhat helpless glance at Li Qingqian, and began to reproach her. "I just so happened to be I'm on duty today, at the Genesis Reservoir, and was drawn over after feeling your killing intent earlier. What the heck is going on?" Although there were quite a few scuffles between disciples in the Genesis Reservoir, they were not allowed to invoke genuine killing intent. When Li Qingqian had lost her rationality due to anger earlier, the killing intent she gave off was definitely not fake, and had thus alarmed Elder Miao as the on-duty elder. Li Qingchan was the most outstanding disciples of this generation from their Snow Lotus Peak, and it would undoubtedly be a huge loss for them if she was punished due to any unfortunate incident here. As such, Elder Miao immediately hurried over the moment she felt Li Qingchan's killing intent to prevent her from making a mistake due to recklessness. Even if she was a chosen, killing another disciple would definitely get her punished. Li Qingchan immediately froze up when she heard the question, gritting her teeth, as she hatefully glared at Zhu Yuan. How could she possibly talk about it? This guy. She pointed at Zhu Yuan as she stammered for practically half a day, but was ultimately unable to say anything, only growing increasingly angry and embarrassed as she glared at him. Elder Miao suspiciously looked towards Zhu Yuan. What exactly had this kid done to anger the normally cold as an ice mountain like Li Qingchan? Under Elder Miao's gaze, an awkward look emerged on Zhu Yuan's face as he stepped up and said, "I was indeed the one at fault, but I really did not do it on purpose. I can compensate." Compensate? Li Qingchan clenched her jaw even harder. How are you going to compensate? Are you going to let me see you in return? Zhu Yuan awkwardly scratched his head, before retrieving numerous bottles from his universe bag that were filled with many Dragon Genesis essence crystals. Can I use these as compensation? They were the fruits of him and Tuntun's labors from earlier. Oh? Elder Miao could not help but be shocked by the sight of the Dragon Genesis essence crystals in Zhu Yuan's hands, because she could sense that some of them were clearly from 800 feet aquatic beasts. But Zhu Yuan was merely at the second layer alpha origin stage. How did he manage to hunt too many formidable aquatic beasts? She was not the only one. Even Li Qingchan was surprised for a moment, because she clearly understood how difficult it was to hunt aquatic beasts in the reservoir. Although Zhu Yuan did have quite a substantial amount of Dragon Genesis essence crystals, they were not worth much in Li Qingchan's eyes. She owned a personal hunting ground in the reservoir, and could enter any time she wished. Ordinary Dragon Genesis essence crystals held little allure to her. Hence, she merely swept a cold glance at Zhu Yuan. Just as she was about to speak, Elder Miao suddenly arrived at her side. Elder Miao advised in a low voice, "Qingchan, although I still do not know what has happened, you will only lose out even more if you insist on continuing." This made Li Qingchan somewhat sullen. She was one of the 10 great chosens after all, but had ended up being completely seen by this bastard. How could she possibly swallow this? Elder Miao said, "If I'm not wrong, that girl should be Zhu Xiaoyao, who recently joined the sect. Peak Master Whitebrow regards her very highly, and values her even more than Yi Ji. In fact, Peak's Master Whitebrow has even promised to pass down the position of Peak Master to her if she comes to Spirit Rune Peak." Li Qingchan looked at Yao Yao in amazement. So she was that Zhu Xiaoyao. Her mastery of Genesis runes was indeed immeasurable. It was no wonder that Peak Master Whitebrow held her in such high regard. With her protecting Zhu Yuan, you won't be able to achieve anything. Li Qingchan gently bit into her red lips, somewhat unwilling to accept this. However, she had to admit that Zhu Xiaoyao was very strong, and would surely have a place amongst the 10 great chosens if she wanted. Elder Miao chuckled softly and asked, "Wasn't your initial plans obstructed by Kongxing and Yi Ji?" At the mention of this topic, Li Qingchan felt even more sullen, feeling that everything was going wrong for her. The 1,000-feet aquatic beast she had her sights on was snatched away by Kongxing and Yi Ji, and she had even been interrupted by an intruding Zhu Yuan while she was soaking in her personal hot spring. "If you can calm down, I will help you mediate," said Elder Miao. Li Qingchan's hands clenched slightly as her expression fluctuated indeterminately. In the end, she reluctantly nodded. She understood that there was no benefit for her to continue kicking up a fuss. After calming down, she knew that she could not possibly murder Zhu Yuan. Elder Miao breathed a sigh of relief. She was worried that Li Qingchan would choose to be unreasonable and make matters even worse, which would only be disadvantageous towards her. Hence, she pulled Li Qingchan as they landed in the valley. She looked towards Yao Yao with a smile and remarked, "No wonder Peak Master Whitebrow has such a high opinion of you, you are indeed an outstanding talent." Yao Yao's pretty face remained indifferent. She merely glanced behind Elder Miao at Li Qingchan, not speaking at all. Zhu Yuan walked over at this moment and respectfully greeted Elder Miao. "Zhu Yuan, although I do not know why this happened, I believe that you're not the one who has lost the most, right?" Elder Miao looked towards Zhu Yuan and smiled. Zhu Yuan's face was full of awkwardness and embarrassment. He looked towards Li Qingchan, only to see the latter biting into her lips, her bright eyes staring at him like a sword. Of course he wasn't the one who had lost out the most. He could only awkwardly nod his head. "Then are you going to make up for it?" asked Elder Meow. "All I have are these Dragon Genesis Essence crystals, but they do no meet Senior Sister Lee's standards." Zhu Yuan forced a smile. He too did not want to offend Li Qingchan, and it would naturally be best if they could amiably resolve this matter. Elder Meow waved her hand and said, "Never mind about the Dragon Genesis Essence crystals. I hope that you guys can help out Li Qingchan as compensation, then we can call this matter even, and no one shall ever bring it up again in the future." "Help?" Zhu Yuan was taken aback, as he looked towards Yao Yao. A puzzled look also flitted across her clear eyes. Elder Meow nodded and explained with a smile, "Qingchan's goal is the 1,000-feet aquatic beast, so I hope to ask for your help." Although she was speaking to the two of them, her gaze ultimately paused on Yao Yao's face, clearly aiming for the latter's aid. Yao Yao nonchalantly asked, "Is she unable to deal with a 1,000-feet aquatic beast?" Li Qingchan calmly explained, "I can naturally deal with a 1,000-feet aquatic beast, but am currently obstructed by Kongshen and Yi Ji's cooperation." Kongshen and Yi Ji. Zhu Yuan secretly wet his lips. So the two of them were working together to exclude Li Qingchan. Elder Meow smiled as she nodded. "That's right. If Yao Yao can help Li Qingchan stop Yi Ji, she will have a chance to compete for the 1,000-feet aquatic beast." By this point, Yao Yao, Li Qingchan and Zhu Yuan were all aware of Elder Meow's intentions. So she planned on borrowing their power to contend against Kongshen and Yi Ji. Yao Yao's gaze seemed to sweep toward Li Qingchan. Li Qingchan was a little unable to shame with the humiliation any further, and somewhat stubborn said, "Elder Meow, I can deal with those too. Moreover, even if I lose this chance, there will still be other opportunities in the future." She was not willing to lower her head in front of Yao Yao. "Both you and Kongshen, and just that single step from the divine dwelling stage. If you yield this chance to Kongshen, he will be a step ahead," said Elder Meow with a solemn expression. "So I hope that you will not be willful." Li Qingchan's brows tightly knitted together. In the end, she could only grit her teeth and turn away. Elder Meow turned towards Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao with a friendly expression and said, "I hope that the two of you can give me face and resolve the conflict you have with Qingchan, while taking this opportunity to turn an enemy into a friend." Zhu Yuan let out a bitter laugh. Elder Meow may appear kind and friendly, but she was obviously a formidable person. If they were to reject, based on Elder Meow words, they would be disrespecting her as an elder. Zhu Yuan looked towards Yao Yao and said, "I think you should be the one to decide." How could he not know that Elder Meow was only concerned about Yao Yao? As for himself, he was at best some kind of accompanying freebie. Thus, he still had to seek Yao Yao's opinion. If she refused, Zhu Yuan would rather offend Li Qingchan than force Yao Yao to help. After all, Li Qingchan's importance was a far cry from Yao Yao's in his eyes, and he would respect her wishes even if he ended up offending an elder. Yao Yao fell silent for a brief moment, before gently tapping her Jade Genesis rune brush on her palm. Her eyes seemed to swirl in thought as the corners of her mouth raised slightly. "We can help, but she has to ask herself." Li Qingchan's eyes immediately widened, her full chest heaving slightly. Zhu Yuan could not help but place his hand over his eyes. "Big sis, we've already reached this stage, can you not cause trouble now?" In the end, Li Qingchan was unable to speak the words from her mouth, her gorgeously pretty face a blend of anger and shame. How could she not know that Yao Yao wanted to make her bow? However, given her unbending and stubborn character, it was obviously not going to be easy to make her submit. Hence, just as Li Qingchan was about to break the deal, Elder Meow could only step up and smooth things over. Upon seeing this, Yao Yao did not persist in her request, merely giving an alternate suggestion. "Since that is the case, we want half of that 1,000-feet aquatic beast's Dragon Genesis Essence crystal." Elder Meow immediately had something to say about this. However, Li Qingchan was faster. "Deal." She rather split the benefits than yield. In addition, she did not want to owe Yao Yao anything. After all, Zhu Yuan was the cause of the problem, and it had nothing to do with Yao Yao. However, Yao Yao was now the one contributing, and as for Zhu Yuan, from what Li Qingchan could see, he was just someone who purely relied on Yao Yao, and this collaboration had nothing to do with him. Zhu Yuan's second-layer alpha origin strength basically made him unqualified to be part of this fight. Hence, Splitting half of the Dragon Genesis Essence Crystal would make things even with Yao Yao, everyone getting what they needed and no one owing anyone else anything. It would also prevent her from feeling indebted to Yao Yao when they met again. This was something the prideful Li Qingchan could not accept. When Elder Miao saw how decisively Li Qingchan had responded, she could only somewhat helplessly say, "Lass, half of the Dragon Genesis Essence Crystal will not be enough for you to reach an 8-dragon baptism." Li Qingchan calmly replied, "No matter, we are not losing out either as long as we ensure that Kongxing is unable to get a lead." Elder Miao could only smile bitterly as she shook her head. This lass was really too stubborn. She could clearly enjoy the complete Genesis Dragon Essence Crystal if she just opened her mouth. Yao Yao gently tapped the Jade Genesis rune brush on her palm as she glanced at Li Qingchan in slight surprise, evidently not expecting her to make such a decision. However, it also made Yao Yao give a slight nod of approval, the dislike she had towards Li Qingchan due to her overbearingness earlier fading somewhat. Yao Yao offhandedly asked, "Shall we go then?" Li Qingchan nodded, before her cold as an ice mountain eyes turned towards Zhu Yuan. "He doesn't need to come along, right?" Although the matter had been forcibly resolved, Li Qingchan felt somewhat unnatural when she looked at Zhu Yuan. The moment she recalled how he had seen everything, an uncomfortable feeling would fill her entire body. Humiliation and anger, magnified to the extreme. Of course, the most important reason was because a second-layer alpha origin like Zhu Yuan could not possibly interfere in a battle between chosens such as Kongxing and Yi Ji. To be blunt, Zhu Yuan would only be a burden if he went. Zhu Yuan naturally understood Li Qingchan's thinking, and could only laugh helplessly, not angry that he was being looked down upon. There was indeed a gap between him and the 10 great chosens such Li Qingchan, and it was only logical for him to be treated with contempt. Since it was the truth, Zhu Yuan would naturally acknowledge it. He was not so narrow-minded that he would resent her because of this. There was a slight trace of cheekiness in Yao Yao's eyes as she glanced at him and leisurely said, "Let him follow us. Who knows, he may even turn out to be useful." Li Qingchan frowned slightly, clearly unable to comprehend what use a second-layer alpha origin disciple would be in such a situation. However, since Yao Yao had spoken, it would not be appropriate for her to object. In any case, they would just make sure Zhu Yuan was far away when they fought. Although he was weak, he was admittedly very quick. At the very least, he had managed to evade her pursuit for quite some time earlier. Her gaze swept past Yao Yao and Zhu Yuan, somewhat curious about their relationship. It was clearly no ordinary relationship, and went far beyond that of simple friends. This baffled Li Qingchan even more. Based on her initial impression, Yao Yao was clearly a rather indifferent and aloof individual. If Li Qingchan's iciness was akin to a mask, Yao Yao's iciness originated from within. Someone like her was extremely difficult to get close to, what more with someone else of the opposite sex. Most importantly, Yao Yao's appearance, aura and Genesis rune talent made her an object of adoration for numerous disciples even in a place like the Zhangshuan sect. Hence, numerous extremely talented disciples would surely be smitten by her, and these disciples were definitely even more outstanding than Zhu Yuan, whether it was in the aspect of looks or talent. In Li Qingchan's opinion, the two of them lived in completely different worlds, and yet, contrary to all reason or logic, Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao had such a close relationship. This really greatly baffled the former. How had Zhu Yuan obtained the favor of a genius blessed by the heavens such as Yao Yao? While such thoughts were swirling in her heart, Elder Miao spoke up, "Since everything has been settled, you guys should hurry up and act. It will not be appropriate for me to interfere in the subsequent matters. According to the rules of the sect, battles in the Genesis Reservoir were the affairs of the disciples, and the duty elder was only here to respond to any unexpected events. The main reason she had come here was because she had been alarmed by Li Qingchan's killing intent, and now that everything had been resolved, Elder Miao naturally had to return to patrolling the Genesis Reservoir." Li Qingchan gave a faint nod. Elder Miao revealed a kind smile to Yao Yao and Zhu Yuan as Genesis Qi rose under her feet. She rose into the air and swiftly disappeared into the horizon. In the wake of Elder Miao's departure, the atmosphere by the reservoir turned silent again. Li Qingchan and Yao Yao were both cold and unresponsive. If the other party did not speak, they would not open their mouths either. After some silence, Zhu Yuan was the first to cave in under the awkward atmosphere. "Senior Sister Li, shall we get going? If you know the location, lead the way." Li Qingchan shot a look at Zhu Yuan and nodded. Without saying anything, she rose into the air and began flying towards a certain direction. "This young lady is really very prideful," commented Yao Yao, as she gently twirled her Genesis rune brush while watching Li Qingqian leave. "No matter how prideful she is, she still can't beat you," remarked Zhu Yuan in his heart, before peering into the distance. "I'm looking forward to see what 1,000 feet aquatic beast is like. Someone is already looking down on you. You'd better not bring too much shame to me later on," teased Yao Yao. Zhu Yuan chuckled, as if he really did not mind at all. "It is indeed true that I am currently unable to interfere in a battle between chosens. That's why she wasn't wrong, of course. No one can tell what the future will hold." Towards the end, a certain arrogance was finally revealed in his voice. With regards to pride, Zhu Yuan did not have less than others. However, pride was pride after all, and he had to acknowledge reality. He knew that there was indeed a gap between him and the 10 great chosens for now, but he also believed in himself. It was only a matter of time for him to catch up to them. As long as he was given some time, he would show Li Qingqian that there was really nothing amazing about a chosen. "Are you planning on slowly making her take notice of you, and ultimately sway the tender heart of a maiden? She's the #1 beauty of the Zhangshuan sect." Yao Yao grinned. Zhu Yuan hastily smiled and said, "What #1 beauty? What chance does Li Qingqian have now that big sis Yao Yao is also in the Zhangshuan sect? Is that so? You've already seen her body after all, aren't you tempted?" Yao Yao's tone was tinged with amusement. Zhu Yuan's face turned black, as he hurriedly changed the topic. "Let's get going. We should also find out for ourselves how good those 2 chosens are." Zhu Yuan's foot pushed off the ground as golden Genesis chi whizzed out, carrying 2 of them into the sky, and swiftly began flying in the direction Li Qingqian had taken earlier. This video will end here.